This is the Open University.
Welcome back to the Open University, and if I have a slightly husky voice today, it's because I've contracted COVID, the BA4 or 5 variant, which is, as we know, good at immune escape. And so despite all my vaccinations and my previous COVID exposure, I've got it again. It's just a bit of a runny nose, it's a bit of a headache, it's a bit of an itchy throat. It's nothing very serious, but it does give me a hell of a sexy voice. So I've just spent several weeks actually in the UK for the first time in 2 years. And I was rather expecting to be horrified by the UK, just because when you read the papers and you see how it's going from afar, it does look horrific. Reading about Priti Patel and her measures to send people to Rwanda and all the rest of it. But actually, I was quite surprised by not being horrified. I really enjoyed Scotland especially. And in Scotland, I had a chance to meet my future brother-in-law, who is Irvine Welsh, the writer, the author of Trainspotting. And this is a newspaper, a Daily Record article about how he's marrying my sister. It says, choose wife. Of course, his famous sequence in a passage in Trainspotting says, choose life. He makes fun of Catherine Hamnett's choose life t-shirt and says, actually, choose heroin because life is shitty. But he seems to have come around to life being non-shitty, because it's nice to be successful. And my sister and he are very much in love and are going to get married, I think, in a kind of slightly private beach wedding in Ibiza or in New York or somewhere. They tend to jet around a lot.
How do you feel about becoming each other's brother-in-law?
Is that part of the interview?
Yeah.
I'm delighted.
You're delighted.
Fabulous. I just hope I don't get cancelled and then Irvine will get the flack, you know?
Yeah, well, likewise.
What, you get cancelled just for saying something about...
Oh, Christ knows anything.
Anything.
You get cancelled so easily. So I was staying in Edinburgh in Irv's flat, actually, and with Noemi, my girlfriend. So I just wanted to talk about some of my impressions of the UK. Here are some images. First of all, here's on the facade of the Modern Art Museum in Edinburgh. Everything is going to be all right. And this is a neon by Martin Creed, who is a Scottish artist whose work I like a lot. Everything's going to be all right. It's a nice sentiment. Here's another thing by Martin Creed. It says the whole world plus the work equals the whole world. That's in Tate Modern. I like that one a lot, actually, because it implies that you add your work to the world and it doesn't really change anything. Art doesn't change that much. It's still the whole world. But at the same time, your work becomes part of the world and it becomes, you've contributed to the world when you make work. So I kind of like that. It's kind of a paradox as well because, 1 plus X equals X, equals the same thing. This is a slogan I got really sick of. I mean, this is the kind of stuff I did expect to be horrified by and was horrified by. See it, say it, sorted. This is the Stasi-like refrain you hear on every train in the UK. In fact, as you pull out of every single station, they put a little announcement. It always reminds me of when I was a schoolboy. I was sent to church on Sundays to an Episcopalian church, and the minister had an event called Sipsy and Spend, which I thought was a pretty stupid title for a kind of bake sale, essentially, because you would be drinking something and then you'd see things and then you'd spend a penny, presumably. I don't know. It sounds like you were going to piss away the tea you'd been drinking earlier. Here, this is equally a ludicrous slogan. See it, say it, sorted. This is the Stasi-like Clipe slogan in which you're supposed to observe your fellow passengers, and if you see anything that doesn't look right, as they put it, you're supposed to text a number, the British Transport Police number, and they will sort it. Sorted, of course, is a bit of a drug term. You're sorted for ease and whiz, famously. This advert is creepy because it says if you see somebody seeing the fact that he's being seen or she's being seen, this is somebody who's being surveyed by video in a station, pretending to take a portrait of a friend, but actually taking a picture of the security arrangements of the cameras. Are they checking security? Please report any unattended items or suspicious activity to a member of staff immediately. We'll sort it. I don't know. This would not happen in Germany because, of course, people remember the Stasi. They remember when this system of checking up on your neighbours and reporting anonymously on your neighbours was widely practiced in East Germany and led to all sorts of abuses because people who hated their neighbours, people who hated anyone else for whatever reason, could simply clype them up to the authorities and get them in huge trouble. Really unpleasant, bringing out the worst of humanity, let's say. And this, of course, started with, I guess, Theresa May's, sending vans around with numbers where immigrants could be clyped up to the authorities if they were illegal immigrants. This happened, I don't know, a decade ago. So it has been in the offing in Britain for quite a while, but you really see it when you go back and when you haven't seen these sorts of things in France and Germany, you really notice it. This is an HSBC advert. It says, when an abuser controls your finances, they control you. This is playing on people's fears. Of course, they use the term safe spaces, kind of feminist, anti-domestic violence term, safe spaces. And it's this sinister hand controlling your finances. So it's an advert in which they hope to get women to open their own bank accounts. Fair enough, they are a bank. That's what they have a vested interest in that. But this dark, shady abuser, it's always a kind of a lone rogue male, basically, who's controlling you by controlling your money. It's never capitalism itself. I really wanted to stick a sticker on an abuser and just say, when capitalism controls your finances, it controls you. It never actually a systemic criticism you get. Obviously, a bank's not going to give you a systemic criticism of capitalism, but there's always this shady figure of the abuser, and they're saving you with their safe spaces, i.e. their bank accounts, from this lone abuser. Never anything systemic, and of course all our problems are systemic. Here's a sign from King's Cross Community Centre, inclusive activities including baby yoga at King's Cross Community Centre. King's Cross empowers diversity and inclusion. This is woke washing, at its worst, really. How does this this is a hoarding around a huge building development in which people are maximising profit by doing very ecologically unfriendly building right next to the King's Cross station, essentially. So does King's Cross really empower diversity and inclusion, or are they just woke washing? You see this a lot in banks and big companies in the city. They're desperately trying to establish green or anti-sexist, anti-racist credentials. So that those are some elements of Britain, but really it's personal experiences which matter to me. And so the pictures that follow are my personal experience of the UK. This is me at the Barbican, actually, where my brother lives. I did meet up with my brother for the first time in several years, and that was very interesting, really re-establishing our relationship, I guess. The favourite place to go when Naomi and I reached Edinburgh was Armstrong's, which has 4 branches in Edinburgh. One on Coburn Street, one on the Grassmarket, one on Teviot Place, and one on South Clark Street. And we've actually decided that Armstrong's second-hand clothes shop is better than Relique, which is our favourite Parisian clothes shop. We really love Armstrong's. Gosh, let's see, what else? I met my mother. My mother's cat just died. She had this cat called Tasha, and so she felt very bereaved. And she managed, while we were there, to replace her cat with 2 kittens, ragdoll kittens. So that was nice to see her during that phase. Me and Naomi said, we will be your kittens, transitional kittens anyway, in the transition between the late Tasha and these new cats, which are called Tilly and Fingal. Fingal named after Fingal's cave. But he tended to run and hide behind wardrobes and things like that, so he's cowering in a cave, really, rather than being a mythical figure. My mother, very supportive and very nice. Here is the skylight at Irv's flat. Irv lives on Scotland Street. Well, I mean, he's basically moved in with my sister these days, but so his flat is it's very close to where the fictional 44 Scotland Street novels are set. Alexander McCall Smith. If you're familiar with those, it's a kind of saga of bourgeois Edinburgh life. I haven't read very much. I've seen, obviously, the film of Trainspotting. This, by the way, this with the pink door, that was the family house we used to live in the late 70s in Edinburgh. This is me in a poster up on the wall of my sister's gastropub, which is called Little White Pig, a term which I used to tease her with. In the family photograph album, my mother had written a blessed event when Emma was born, because she had 2 boys and then she had 1 girl. She'd always wanted a girl. So it says a blessed event, and Little White Pet was Emma's nickname. And I teased her with Little White Pig as a kind of alternative mean nickname. So she's used that as the name of her gastropub in Edinburgh. These are just scenes in and around Edinburgh. The Dean Village, the various cafes. What can I recommend in terms of cafes? There's a good one called The Milkman, which has 2 branches on Coburn Street. There's a good one called Artisan Roasters. There's a good one called The Bearded Barista, which pops up at the Sunday Market in Stockbridge. So, yeah, we're sort of leading a very similar bohemian bourgeois existence in Edinburgh that we live in Paris. The London bits were different, because London's just costs money to do everything in London, just to move. And also the weather was shitty in London. It was grey and cloudy whenever we were there, whereas Edinburgh had this variable weather in which it's every 10 minutes it's sunny and then it's cloudy again. This is the Botanical Gardens, which is a beautiful, beautiful spot. Naomi loved it. We also went to the zoo, which is kind of amazing. I think it's the best sighted zoo in the world, really, Edinburgh Zoo. It's got beautiful views out from Corstorphine Hill, out over the Pentlands, and you sort of have this fantasy architecture and fantasy landscaping, which makes you feel in some corners that you're in Switzerland or in Africa, or, you know, antelopes running free up on the hills and so on and so on. So, yeah, Edinburgh was a lot of fun, and we ended up buying a lot of unnecessary second-hand clothes from Armstrong's. Looking out at Fetty's, Naomi is of that generation to whom J.K. Rowling is a goddess, really, because she defined the imaginative kind of landscape they live in, the same way that someone like David Bowie defined my and Irv's imaginative landscape. In fact, one of the things we did, me and Irv, I was going to say, we could see Fetty's College, which is kind of the model, the stand-in model for Hogwarts, or it's kind of one of the influences on the architecture of Hogwarts, from Irv's window. Every evening especially, it looked particularly good. So Naomi would stand there looking at that. And she was very excited that Emma and Irvin were actually having dinner with J.K. Rowling at one point while we were there. We weren't invited, of course, but it was a fundraiser for the Ukraine. But one thing that me and Irv did, because we're both huge Bowie fans, and we both know a lot of people from the Creation era. He's good friends with Alan McGee and Bobby Gillespie and all these people I was kind of with on the Creation label. And of course he scripted a recent Creation docudrama thing with obviously no reference to Momus in it. I was written out, but I hadn't met Irv at that point. Even if I had met him, I would have been scripted out, because, you know, print the legend is really what you do in those kind of situations. You don't have to talk about the dead ends, the cul-de-sacs, like Momus on Creation. But Irv and I sat down and did an interview together talking about David Bowie. And if my sister says it's okay, I'll put a little clip of that here.
Everybody, I see it in just about in the art of almost every person, whatever discipline they're working in, who's come out of that Bowie era. I think it's so influential that you don't really, the idea that you have one set of things that you stick to, it's very antiquated. It's a very pre-Bowie notion. Yeah. I sort of people want you to stay in the same box.
Commercially it works.
Yeah. And when I wrote my first book, I had no intention of writing it in the Scottish vernacular, but it just didn't really work any other way. The characters didn't come to me like that, and it would have been pretentious to do it. But I didn't want to be a slave to that as well. I didn't want to think every single book I have to write it like this, and I kind of haven't really. I've always I've always used devices that suited my purposes at the time, and I think that's the kind of the training basically that I've had from that immersion in his stuff.
Yeah. It's funny how he's like a smashed, and now he's gone as well, but there's still all these fragments of him left across the whole cultural field, not just in Britain, but everywhere you go. You see all these, but they're all different. That's the thing. Yeah. Everybody liked Bowie in a different way, or saw bits of themselves in Bowie that had been realised.
Even his name, I mean, I call him Bowie, you call him Bowie. It's like it's like there's nothing that's sort of set about him in a way, you know.
Yeah, we're all happy to welcome Irv into the family, and he's happy to welcome us into his enormous ongoing success. He has a TV show called Irvine Welsh's Crime, a bit like Roald Dahl's Tales of Mystery and Suspense, or whatever it was called in the 70s. You know, when your author name is in the title of a TV show, you know you've made it. This is that's actually an Ian Hamilton Finlay artwork at the museum, the Scottish Museum. Irv has his own little corner up on the 7th floor, I think it is, of the Scottish Museum's contemporary galleries, a little Trainspotting corner. So one of the things I asked him about in the interview was, how does he feel about having made an impact on the mainstream culture?
Okay.
If I can say this, you've also gone, I mean, I've never gone mainstream. I'm like a failed Bowie who's doing Lodger over and over again and nobody's buying it. But you've actually, with your writing, you've gone really mainstream. You've had that impact on the culture. I can go up to Chambers Street Museum and there's a whole thing about Trainspotting and the Scottish gallery there. How does that feel to have had that kind of impact?
It's one of these things that I don't really think about it in that way, because you're only immersed in the project that you are immersed in. If I go into a bookstore and I see all these books of the spines and all that, it's like they've been written by someone else. You know, I mean, I don't really have any sense of ownership of them. If I go into there's a display or pictures of me in some kind of museum, it's like it's about someone else. You know, I feel very abstracted and disconnected from it all.
But you must have some satisfaction at having made an impact, you know.
Yeah, I think really what, you know, it's like the impact you want to make is to basically stay in the game. You want to keep doing what you're doing, because I couldn't work in a pub pulling pints now for people. I couldn't sort of I would be too de-skilled, you know. I mean, I don't have the mindset for that anymore. All I can do is do creative stuff, and that's, you know, and what has given me is the license to be able to do that in a kind of reasonable level of comfort, you know.
Oh, this was a walk down to Leith, down the water of Leith. Really nice cafe called, what was it called? Harrison McPherson or something like that, with a gallery attached. Leith Walk was all being remade for the trams, which is a great development. The trams used to stop at Queen Street, but now they go all the way down to Leith, or they will very shortly. Cycle lanes and tram tracks are replacing the road traffic down Leith Walk. So Leith Walk is one of the few places Edinburgh has that has a real multi-ethnic feeling. It has, Pakistani and Indian people and Chinese people. And this is the Queen Street Museum, which is a very elegant space. That's Thomas Carlyle, who's a bit of a hero of mine for a book he wrote called Sartor Resartus, which is the Tailor Retailored. The Tailor Retailored is a very satirical, pseudo-academic work about clothes. So obviously if you're a bit of a dandy or you love clothes, then it's a good read. And also if you like sort of pseudo-academic tracts or broadcasts for that matter. I was sort of put in mind of the Scar folk sort of take on Britain when I was in Britain, because it really has become a kind of Scar folky. Those posters, you know, the See It, Say It sorted poster and everything, or haven't shown you the sexual looking one. Here is a sexual looking poster. Do not look at other people on the tube. This really does bring to mind Richard Littler's work, because you can sort of, it even looks graphically like Richard Littler's work. It's that kind of scary poster, like the one that says, are you thinking of doing it, don't, or whatever. Whatever you're thinking of, don't. He was developing Scarfolk with the BBC to be a TV series, but it was cancelled. Perhaps because it was a little bit too close to the bone, and because Britain has become the kind of place that can't laugh at itself, despite the fact that it needs desperately to laugh at itself. The funny thing about London was that we were going to these places in London that we go to in Paris. So we went to Arabica. This is actually Arabica here. Arabica Coffee, which is actually a Japanese chain, but has branches in Paris, and used to have one in Berlin, but it closed down. And we also went to Kitsune, Cafe Kitsune, and we went to Machi Machi, which does bubble tea, which is on Shaftesbury Avenue. In every case, they're inferior to their Parisian versions. Like Machi Machi is really shabby and has hardly any of the menu in London that it has in Paris, and especially not my favourite, which is a grapefruit frappe, icy grapefruit drink with real grapefruit in it. The coffee at Arabica was kind of parallel, but actually that Arabica in Covent Garden was okay, but Kitsune wasn't, and Machi Machi wasn't. Kitsune is in a place in Mayfair which just reeks of horrible wealth and snobism, like so much of London. Here we are back in Paris. I'm looking at shirts again at the pop-up reliques, and this is real life. This is what life should be. This is where we're happy, except when we get COVID. See you next time.
Open University.